From one of Australia's former leading homicide detectives, this is I Catch Killers with Gary Jubelin.
Maggie said, "Oh, come up, lunch is ready." And he said, "Pip, you go up. Rose and I'll stay here for a bit."
Yeah.
And Pip said, "No, Rose can go up," because she knew what he was going to do. And, like, what a girl.
Yeah, protecting a little sister.
I Catch Killers with Gary Jubelin.
Today I had a conversation with a woman named Michelle Milthorpe. Michelle found out that her daughters had been sexually assaulted by a person who is considered a trusted family friend. This man was treated like a de facto grandfather. He'd gained the trust of the whole family. Now, what Michelle told me about the impact this pedophile had on the children, I think is going to shock you, and it was certainly deeply personal. So, Michelle, it was a typical Sunday morning, 2013. You're laying in bed on a Sunday morning and your 5-year-old daughter jumps into bed and said, "Mummy, I've got something to tell you."
Yeah.
And then words came out that actually changed your life. I think it's fair enough to say changed your life. That she said words to the effect of, "Mummy, I don't like Leon licking my vagina."
Yep.
Now, Leon was a family friend. We'll go into more details about that later.
Yep.
But that were the words that came out of your 3-year-old daughter's mouth. How did it make you feel?
Oh, look, it was, as you say, it was just a everyday Sunday morning, and we did have, our kids were sleeping in our beds. They were bed hopping a lot, and we were frustrated by that. You want a good night's sleep. Anyway, Rose said that, and it shocked me. Obviously, it shocked me. I just had this moment where she said it, she repeated it for me, and I went into what I call professional mode, because I thought, there's no way she could say this unless it was happening.
It's not the type of words that the 5-year-old would use.
No. And I said, that's not great. That's not good. Is there anything else that he does that you don't like? Anyway, and she went on to tell me a few other things that were going on that we had that I had no knowledge of. And then she said, "Can I watch Tutu now?" Which was that ABC children's channel. So she'd sort of dropped this bomb, and then she moved on with her life really, really quickly.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably pretty indicative of how things went from there. It was like we were on this parallel track that it just jumped. Everything about we sort of became before and after, that very moment for our lives. And, so I went, and my husband was down in another bedroom, and I went down and talked to him, and I actually couldn't speak. He thought somebody had died.
Yeah.
When I got him, I said, Rose has just told me something, and I vomited. I couldn't speak. And then I told him what she'd said, and then she repeated that to him as well. And it kind of just started this amazing roller coaster that was really, really crap.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a fair way of describing it as crap. But to hear your daughter say those words, and then you've got to process it, dissect the information, and then work out what to do. So what did you do?
So for me, when she said it, she actually also said, and Pippa told me that he shouldn't do things like that.
Pippa being her
older sister.
Yep.
So
how old was Pippa
So Pip
at the
was
time?
8 or 8.5 at the time. And, Rose had just turned 5. So, Pip was 8.5 at the time. And so I went down to Pip and I woke her up and I said, Rose has just said something to me that is a little bit concerning. And, she just mentioned that something was happening that she didn't like, and somebody was doing things to her that she didn't like. And her entire demeanour changed.
Yeah.
I hadn't used names. I hadn't used any information except for that. And she just withdrew into herself, and she actually got her pillow and put it over her face. Anyway, and then I took the pillow off her face, and she just had a tear rolling down her face.
Yeah.
And, she couldn't talk, but Pip's always been a really great writer. And I said, would it be easier for you to write down if there's something going on that you don't like. And she actually wrote yes. Yeah. Anyway, and then she wrote it, became evidence. But yeah, she just acknowledged that, things were happening to her as well.
Okay, so this is all on a Sunday
morning.
Sunday morning.
Yeah.
Now, you're a teacher.
Yeah.
And so you understand like mandatory reporting and
Yeah.
also about your responsibility as a teacher, not contaminating kids' evidence or leading questions.
Yeah.
How did you spend that Sunday morning? I'm just trying to comprehend it, Ben, and I wanted to start the talk about it so people comprehend how a life can be changed in that split moment.
Yep. Look, I think, so we also have an older daughter, Maggie, and I had a conversation with her as well on that morning, and she indicated that she had no knowledge what I was talking about. And then because Leon's wife was really close with our family, for us, we considered her like a pseudo-grandparent for us. I didn't feel comfortable having this knowledge and not having a conversation with her, because they were literally at our house the day before. So Brent, my husband, took the girls to the park, and I invited her around just to have a chat and to help me choose a dress. I decided
that was the way that you invited her in. Just so people understand, when we refer to Leon and Jen, Leon being Jen's partner, that's not their real names because there's a court order out.
Yep.
But can you describe what relationship, how they fitted into the family situation?
Yeah. Look, we moved to Albury from Cootamundra. We grew up in Cootamundra. We moved down to Albury when Maggie, our eldest, was 8 weeks old. And I went back to work about 6 months after that and needed somebody to help look after the kids. And we found Jen. She was a lady who was happy to help us out with that, and she became like our family. Yeah. She was retired at that point. She'd been retired for about a year, but she was still taking care of Rose for us a couple of days a week. And, if we were ever away, she would look after the girls. And
so how long had you known Jen and Leon for?
10 years.
10 years.
Yeah.
And I know in the document you wrote about that, and I've got to say it was very, very powerful, the way you put the words down on how this incident impacted on you. But Leon was looked on almost like a de facto grandfather.
Yeah, he was.
I think if I remember rightly, he would go to the school for Grandparents' Day. Yeah. And things like that.
Yeah, do all those things, go to dancing concerts, with Jen. And... so they were essentially like grandparents, and they say when you move towns, friends of the family you make for yourself, and that's sort of what we felt like we had with them, and to, some of their family members as well. So, it was,
So there's a shock, and I'm just trying to articulate what you're going through there. You've got the horror of what your daughters have said to you. Yep. And then the betrayal of trust with Leon and Jen, and this is a Sunday morning, and you can't just sit with this. This is not the situation where you can just sit and ponder. No. So you've invited Jen over to your house on the pretense of picking out a dress or something.
And look, I did it that way, and I actually got accused of being deceiving in court because I said that I had done it in that way.
Don't worry, we'll be talking about court later on. Yeah.
But I did it that way because Jen had always been around to our house. She'd visited, and he didn't really come around. In my mind, he was Jen's husband. Yeah. Jen looked after our kids.
That was the family connection.
So he had been coming around more frequently, which... It was fine, but it was just different, and I didn't want him to be there, obviously, for obvious reasons. So I invited Jen around and their daughter, and they came around, and I spoke to her, and I told her exactly what Rose had said, and I showed her what Pippa had written, and I thought she would be angry. I thought she'd, have a go at me. I think if someone said that to me about someone I loved, my first reaction would be to defend. She didn't. Yeah, her reaction was, oh my God, Leon, what have you done? What have you done to our girls?
So the conversation, it must have been difficult and confronting. How long did it go on for?
Look, she was probably there for about 10 minutes, and then she actually went and got him.
Right.
So she left and went and picked him up and brought him back to the house.
You're there on your own. Brent's got the girls
Yeah, Brent
out.
had the girls. Yeah.
Okay. What happened when he came back?
So he came back in, and I could hear him on the way in, saying, "Oh, this is ridiculous. This is ridiculous." Yeah. And he walked into the back room of our house, and I was just sitting there, and I think he saw the look on my face. He sort of backpedaled a little bit because he could see that we weren't taking it, that it was ridiculous. And he was saying, "Oh, you can't believe this. You can't believe it." And he was unreasonable. His shirt was inside out. I still just remember that his shirt was inside out. It was the most ridiculous thing to remember, but. It was just this thing. I was like, "Oh my God, your shirt's inside out. You didn't even put your shirt on properly."
Yeah, well, his little dirty secret's finally coming out by the sounds of it.
Yeah, and anyway, he sort of sat down and I just said, and he's trying to convince me that this is a lie. This isn't true, Michelle. This can't be true. And I just said to him, "Tell me why." And I said, "No, actually," I said, "Can you tell me how Rose could know that happens without it happening?
Yeah,
I need you to tell me that. Because if you can tell me that, then this can all go away." Anyway, then he was like faint and he needed a drink. And I just said, "I just think you need to go." Anyway, so he left and his wife left with him. And then the daughter stayed. And then the wife came back in and got the daughter and left. And then she came back again. The wife came back again. Jen came back again. And she just said to me, she goes, "What are we going to do? I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do." And I just said, "Well, you know what I have to do." And I had actually, and I don't know why I did what I did, but I had packed up everything that she gave me. So I had a casserole dish because she'd made some dinner for us a couple of weeks earlier. And, she gave me a necklace for my birthday. I put all these things and just gave them to her because I just didn't. I don't know.
I think an understandable move. Like, it's probably subconsciously, I want you out of my life. I don't want to have anything to do with you. And, so what are we going to do? What are we going to do? I suppose the obvious answer, as you said, well, what do you think we're going to do?
Yeah.
Of course, it's a matter that's got to be reported.
Yeah.
Okay, so you've dealt with that. I'm just trying to get a sense of it because reading what you wrote down about it, and it was a long, it was a condensed version of a book. You describing this, but I've got to say, it's so confronting. But the way you articulate it, and what I hope people that listen today, this is the impact. It's not. I think when we see on the news, we see, pedophiles being charged, 10 kids have been assaulted, that type of thing. We're all happy to see people being caught, but we don't understand the ramifications and the flow-on effect. There's a ripple effect that goes with this type of crime, isn't there?
Yeah. Look, there is, and that was sort of early in the day, and then I think we'd probably got up to about 11:30 by this point. And Brent brought the girls back home. Yeah. I'd made a phone call to the girls' school principal.
Yep.
And I think that subconsciously that was my way of not having to make the report.
Okay. Yep.
I didn't want to have to make the report.
Mandatory reporting if it goes to brought to the attention of the school. Yep.
Yeah. And so she came around that afternoon, and I actually can't really remember what happened while she was there.
Yeah.
I was asked questions about that again during the trial, and I can't remember. I can tell you everything that happened in the morning, but that I think I sort of handed over the reins for about 40 minutes because I just needed to not think.
Yeah.
And then we called the police, and we also called a couple of good friends who came in and got Maggie.
Yep.
Because
how old was Maggie at the time?
She was only 10.
Okay. So we're looking at 5, 8 and 10.
Yeah. And she went with friends of ours. They had no idea what they were doing there. They knew that something had happened. and they just came and got her
Yeah.
and took her to their house and, you know, went and did fun things. And we waited for the police to come. And, you know, in my naivety or ignorance or whatever it is, I think everyone's the same though in this situation. I didn't realise that you called the police around and that's just the first responders.
Yeah.
You know, that they weren't going to talk to the girls. That, you know, we started this journey that was...
Well, I think it's interesting to explain this to people and just so people understand what the processes are, because by understanding it, I won't say it makes it easier, but you've got an appreciation of the step-by-step. So you call the police, you call the local police, they'll send the available car crew round, so whoever's on the car crew will come round and knock on the door. How can I help you? And you explain that situation. So take us through what happened then.
Yeah, so they came around and I assumed that they would want to speak to the girls, and they said, "Oh no, we're not allowed to talk to the girls. There's a team that do that." And I was like, "Okay." And I said, "Well, what do you need from us?" And you know, they said, "Oh, we need to talk to you and your husband." So, and they just took the initial report, and you know, while we were doing that, Brent was understandably just upset. We both were. I was pacing, like I think I looked like a madwoman. I was pacing up and down the lounge room and just saying to these poor guys, you know, it's not like we sit here watching porn. It's not like we do. Like I was just saying the most random things, whatever was coming to my head.
But the things that you're running through your mind, how would my girls at that age talk about these type of things? Where did they get that from?
I wanted there to be a reason other than what it was.
From a mother's point of view, I can fully understand that you'd be looking for, no, this is just a horrible mistake, and
Yeah. Anyway, and this big burly police officer was sitting there, and you know, I'm ranting, walking back and forward, and I just looked at him and I stopped because he just had a tear, and he said, "No, it happened because it happened."
Yeah.
It just happened. And, anyway, they were great. And Brent sort of got up and walked out. We didn't even recognise one of the police officers was someone he'd played footy with.
Yeah.
Like, we just didn't even recognise him. That's the state that we were in at the time. So they came in, they said, "Look, you know, someone will be in touch with you from the child abuse squad."
Yeah.
Didn't know there was one of those. You know, someone will be in touch with you. And we'll get back. And so I just assumed that the next morning we'd have a phone call, or even that afternoon. And we sort of got we took the girls to school the next day.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, we did.
And taking the girls to school, but I would imagine that the balancing act that you've got as a parent is this has happened, it's got to be followed up and we've got to address this. But you've also got kids. The kids have got to get on with their life.
Yeah.
That's a difficult part of juggling.
Yeah, I beat myself up about that for a little bit.
For taking them to school.
Yeah, for taking them to school, because there was part of me that was, like, I just did it because that's what you did. You know, at school, we're going to school. And then the school counsellor is actually someone that I had gone to school with.
Yeah.
And she met me on the playground and took me into her room, and I lost it. And, you know, I was like, I can't believe I brought them here, you know, and she's like, they're safe here. You know, they're safe here. They've got their friends here. You know, it's okay. And it wasn't until a few months later that I sort of was processing it again. And a counsellor said to me, she said, "Look, you know, I can see that this is really troubling you." She said, "But you need to understand and give yourself a bit of a break." She said, "That day, your kid's life got better. It was your life that changed."
Yeah, that was an interesting.
Yeah.
You wrote that down. That was an interesting twist.
And it kind of gave me a bit of grace. I sort of could sit with that and be okay with it, even though I still can't believe I did it.
Well, I think there's a balancing between, if you didn't let the kids go to school, they've reported something that I'm sure he told them not to tell anyone and all that. If they've reported that, and then you stop them going to school, they might think, "Oh, it's right, look, I've done wrong."
Yeah.
It's so confusing for kids understanding what's going on with this. Just before we move on, so we'll just pause it at that point where the girls have disclosed this to you. You've spoken to the perpetrator, you've spoken to the wife of the perpetrator, and you've informed the police. Describe the girls, because you talk about it, your life prior and then post. Describe the girls to me and the family life that you were living up until that point.
Look, we had a really what seemed to be an idyllic life. Really,
Yeah.
I call it we were living the Australian dream. You know, we were both working. We had a home that was lovely. We had a great group of friends. We participated in sport. The girls played sport. They, they did their dancing and they did their basketball. We water skied. You know, we did all the really fun, typical things. I'm glad the girls were the age they were when this came out, as ridiculous as it sounds, because in terms of our family and probably Brennan and my relationship too, we're in that good space. You know, the kids could do things a little bit independently.
Yep.
We could have a conversation, all those things that you can't do when your kids are really little. We just had a typical, a good life.
Yeah.
We were happy, and we had Mags, who was quiet and shy, but really creative and caring, and the best big sister. Pip was spirited. They were the words that were used about her, and she was that kid that would dress herself, and I would have parents say, "I can't believe you let her leave the house like that," but she thought she looked amazing and she wore it well. And Rose was just everybody's friend. She was, that was just the way she was. She could talk to adults, she could talk to children. She was just great.
Well, you've described the type of life that most of us aspire to, and you're going along happily, and then this kicks in. Yeah. So I think people often, when the police are called in the way that you articulated, you thought, okay, the police are here now, everything's going to happen straight away and it's sorted out and all that. It's so far from the case, it's not funny, isn't it? It's
and almost like having the idyllic life was almost a curse, because as far as the police were concerned, and as far as social services and all of those things who were involved, our kids were safe. So
a child at risk. So
they weren't at
to
risk.
Call people out.
And which is great. But we didn't realise that meant that they get prioritised. Yeah, they go to the bottom of the pile, so to speak. Yeah. And it's actually quite confronting to understand that you do get needed. You do have to go to the bottom of the pile because there is so much need.
Yeah, well, it's just synonymous with how many kids are sexually abused. It's just
and people don't know it. They just don't know it.
People don't know it. I'm seeing it more and more, and when we were having the conversation the other day, I was speaking to you about the podcast series I did in prison, and the amount of people I met in prison that were victims of childhood sexual abuse, and it perpetuates, and they carry that for the rest of their life, and often make poor life choices based on what's happened. Yeah. With your story, I think it was it 8 days before the police actually came and interviewed the children? Yeah,
and it was, and that was another thing about living regionally too. I think was a bit of an issue there, because we knew the lead detective from Child Abuse Squad, so we couldn't. Well, it was better not to be interviewed by him, so there was no conflict of interest. So we had to wait for somebody else to come back from holidays as well. Yeah. So there was a bit of a wait time there. So for us and for the girls, particularly Pippa, who was spirited and had this really strong sense of justice, it was like, well, I told you this thing. I no longer get to see Jen. And everything that he said was true. People don't believe you. People don't want to talk about it. And I'm not going to talk to the police. They've waited too long.
That would break your heart as a parent. Yeah. Hearing that.
Yeah.
And explaining that Pippa's concerned about not seeing Jen. That was because Jen was such a prominent part in their life.
Yeah.
And Mr. Creepy, or Leon, has put it in their heads that if you talk about this. Yeah. All bad things are going to happen, and she's seen it as exactly it's coming true. And did you notice their behaviour in that? And I'm talking like I'm sure the further impacts and the way the matter went through court. From telling you, was there a change in the kids now that they brought it out in that week waiting for the police?
For Rose,
Yep.
Rose had this, it was like she'd been given permission to say whatever,
Yep.
So the dam wall had broken and she didn't have an understanding of, every time she was telling me something, the impact that it was having. I was really grateful and glad that she could talk about it, but it was really hard to listen to.
So now that she's comfortable telling you what's happened and she's revealing you details that no parent would want to hear, I would imagine.
Yeah, that's it. For Pippa, she was sort of old enough to start feeling a bit of shame and a bit of embarrassment, I think you could say. And then that real angry, no one cares anyway. Yeah. Why did we tell? Because everything's changed.
Yeah.
Everything's changed. We don't get to see Jen anymore, but no one even cares because no one's, so she really withdrew and was a little bit angry that Rose had told us.
Yep.
Maggie, she didn't really understand what was going on for the girls because obviously we didn't tell her what they'd told us. But she was angry with them because her life changed too.
Right.
So she didn't get to see Jen either, and she didn't know her.
What was going on.
She didn't know anyone but her. Like for her, Jen was as close as any family member.
Another difficult part, I would imagine, is that because you're trying to protect the children from contamination of their evidence, and and you're aware of that from what you would have given knowledge as a school teacher, but I'm just trying to imagine the family dynamics. You'd want to sit down with the whole family and talk it through and let them support each other and all that, but that wasn't available to you. So it just adds another layer to it, doesn't it? Yeah,
and look, that's one of the, we found out since that's one of the things that they use in court to try and separate cases, which is tricky. And Brent was probably a little bit more savvy about that than I was, to be honest. He just said, they can't talk to one another about this.
Yeah.
Which, like in hindsight, that was a really great thing in terms of the court. But as you say, for them, it probably was difficult for them in their own relationship with one another. To not be able to talk.
I would imagine as a child being told you can't talk about this is almost inferring that you've done something wrong.
Yeah.
Like in their minds, I would imagine that type of narrative, if it's been fed to them, that they would have felt, well, why can't I talk? I've done nothing wrong.
Yeah.
And then, well, you can't tell your sister or talk to people about it. So it's such a complex situation. We've talked about the impact on with your daughters. What about yourself and your husband?
This is, look, and I know it was something when I wrote a blog that isn't publicly available anymore just because it's...
and that's a document I'm referring to.
Yeah,
and I might add, like I read that and I was angry, sad and full of mixed emotions. It was such a revealing account of what you guys have been through.
Well, as I said, I hadn't read it for a little while. I read it on my way
Oh,
today
right.
and it made me cry. It's like, oh dear, I haven't done this for a while. But look, I think for me, it was that experience to write down some of these things was an experience for me just to get my thoughts out on paper because, how do you talk to people about this sort of stuff? And, even just in terms of intimacy with your husband, I did not want to be touched because I'm hearing these things and sex was made dirty, and because of what was happening and what we were hearing. And when I say we, it was me. Yeah. Like the girls were telling me. Yeah. So that was a really,
but that's a side that I hadn't thought when I'm talking about your blog, in that it really made me think about the wider impact, because I hadn't even considered the parents of the child that's been sexually assaulted and then intimacy becomes a problem. But it's so understandable. Like you'd be thinking, not why all this is going on.
Yeah, well, Brent would be mortified. The girls would be worse because I'm talking about it. But it is a reality. And and that's not something that anyone would have told us about.
Yeah.
So, and that's why I did write it down at the time, because I thought, well, this is something I wish someone had said. It's totally normal to not ever feel like doing that again. When you're hearing these things that, but then you start going, well, that's not what that was. That was somebody exerting power.
It's abuse.
Yeah. So, and the rational brain kicks in and you...
But then there was another thing, and again, I apologise if Brent doesn't want to hear this, but I'm in support of him on this, is that and we'll keep it in a chronological order how the investigation evolved, but I'm talking generally when people are finding out, the comments from other blokes that if someone did that to my kid, I'd kill them, or I'd do this, I'd do that. And I would imagine if that was kept, the response that Brent would have got, and it's a very blokey thing to say, and I know so many blokes would be saying the same thing, you'd start be looking at yourself going, well, why aren't I feel like killing him? Which he probably did feel like killing him, but as you articulated, he's a sensible, rational, reasonable person, and it's not going to achieve anything there. But it's just another layer, isn't it?
Yeah,
like
that's
Brent
it.
would be thinking, well, are all these people thinking I'm weak because I haven't gone round and bashed this bloke?
He had some really interesting thoughts, and again, like it's one of those things that, in hindsight we've spoken about. But he said if he had $1 for every time someone said that, we'd be rich.
Yeah.
But the other thing was that he was reluctant to have kids stay at our house.
Yep.
Because he worried that people would think that he was the perpetrator, and things that he knew that was an irrational thought, because obviously he was still living in our home and all of those things, but it made him think about his role as a man a little bit differently. But I loved, and I love looking back and seeing that for him it was about getting around and going into that real protection mode rather than I'm really pleased that he didn't do anything, you know, because that would have just made everything a whole lot harder.
Well, actually, and this is a compliment to him, and what I took away from it, he showed himself to be a man in the way he supported you guys and protected his daughters. But,
a lot of people commented that it was unusual. So people who've worked in the space in child protection or in child abuse squad, they commented on, how unique it was to have both of us so involved in the process. And so we were lucky.
Yeah,
I say we were lucky.
It's interesting you say that, but I think you're probably right on that, because I see a lot of men pull away from it. It's too confronting. Yeah. And, I'm here supporting you, but not really supporting.
Yeah.
So.
He didn't really have a choice.
All right. I'm trying to give him credit, and now you've wrecked it.
He was great.
I know you're only joking.
Yeah.
So, okay, 8 days it's taken. The police have turned up. Did they get the statements at home, or did they take them away to the station? So all this is just flipping young kids' lives upside down, isn't it? So tell us the process there.
So the process was we had to find the turtle door, which was a door at the police station that was the child abuse squad. So we ended up turning it into a game, which is probably deliberate from the people that worked there. So we found the turtle door. Pip was adamant she was not going to speak. Yeah, not going to say anything. They don't want to hear. If they wanted to hear, they would have been here a week ago. All that sort of stuff that a stubborn 8.5-year-old would say. And anyway, so we went in and we met the detective, and it was Glenn, the detective, and he sort of talked to us, and the girls were there. They were just sort of playing, and there was a police hat, and Rose had that on, and all these things. And he said, he said to us, I just want to give you a heads up before we start that 9 times out of 10. This doesn't go anywhere. Yeah. And he said it's not because we don't believe the kids, it's because of what we need to be able to prove to put them through the process. Anyway, that just annoyed me. I was really angry about that. And Brent just said, you haven't met Pip and Milthorpe yet. Yeah, and he knew she could hear.
Yeah.
He said she is really good at telling the truth
Yeah.
and making sure that she's protecting other kids. So,
Yeah.
you know, and he sort of just said it like that. And anyway, so we sat in this waiting room with a really lovely person. So there was the Joint Investigative Response Team at the time.
So people from not just the police.
So it's the police, community health, and it was docs at the time, whatever they've decided to be now.
Community justice.
Yeah. Anyway, so that's who was there. Another issue because we knew a lot of people that worked in that space too.
So again, from what you put down in writing, the country town presents its own problems, and you're not anonymous. No. And people, what are you at the police station for? Why aren't the kids turning up at school? Why aren't the kids? It's hard to hide. Yeah. And the sad part is there should be no shame to it.
No,
but it's just such a complex situation, isn't it?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, so, and we're sitting there and we're putting our kids in this, they take them. So your kids go and they get interviewed by a stranger.
You're not present?
Nope.
And that's terrifying in itself.
To this day, I have never heard what they said.
Yeah.
I don't know what they said. And Rose and I were only discussing it a few days ago, and she said, I can't, I know what happened, but I can't remember what I said. And she said, I just have blocked it out.
Did they video interview?
Yeah, they did. So they videoed them, and so then that happened. It took a couple of hours to go through both the girls. So Pip went first and then Rose went afterwards. And then we sort of got called into a room and somebody else was, with kids playing, doing their thing. We got called into a room and the team were there and, Glenn was sort of just sitting there really quietly. Someone was telling me how well the girls did. Oh, the girls did so well. Thinking, oh, great. I'm so glad they could speak about this. Yeah. It was weird. It's am I meant to be proud? I don't know what to feel here. That's good.
It's just such a surreal situation, isn't it?
And Brent was very quiet and Glenn was very quiet. And then he just sort of hit the desk and he said, I'm charging him.
Yeah.
And the other two sort of looked quite surprised.
Yeah.
And he said, nah, I'm charging him. We've got enough. Anyway, and that was sort of, that was that sort of thing. And, they said, oh, he never does this. Yeah. So that happened. And then it was still, I think it was another 2 weeks or so until he was arrested.
Yeah.
Probably even longer. It was probably 3 weeks. So we were just in this I called it a holding pattern. It felt like there were a number of holding patterns in the process because we didn't know the process. Yep. We didn't know how quickly things would move and also slowly things would move. And I think the thing is that for a lot of people, they know what's going on because they do it all the time, but forget to share that knowledge.
Yeah, I think that not a criticism but advice with policing if you keep the victims informed. And I think, and I've been guilty of it myself as a police officer, you think, this is a norm, you'll understand that these things take time, but most people, most decent people and people who are victims of crime haven't come in contact with police. There's so many decent people out there that don't come into contact with police. So this is a world that you're not familiar with. Yeah. What was going through the girls' minds with all this? I'm looking at the assaults have happened, the trauma that's associated with that, telling you, and then all of a sudden they're dragged into a world that's almost incomprehensible for them.
And look, I think, it is one of those things where you have to ask them sort of thing. But, we obviously have had conversations and through that the advocacy that we've done, they have shared their views on it. Rose is interesting because, she has said before, I had this man doing things to me and saying, you can't tell anybody. And then I had people saying, you have to tell me everything. And it was, trying to balance that out. And again, strangers and people who she didn't know. Glenn's one of Rose's favourite people in the world.
Yeah. Well, full credit to them if they're special people, the detectives that work in that area.
But she still couldn't she still couldn't tell him.
Yeah.
And again, he was a stranger at the
Yeah.
beginning. But yeah, it was still really difficult. And she didn't have a language. She didn't have a language for it.
Yeah.
So yeah, she kind of looked like she was just getting on with things.
Yeah.
And she was quite funny. She came up to me. We'd been at a baptism, and we were outside the church afterwards, just standing around chatting. And she ran over to me and she goes, "Oh, I've just kept these two girls. I've just kept these two girls safe." And I'm like, "What do you mean?
Yeah.
How have you kept them safe?" And she said, "Well, I told them that you can't let people lick your vaginas."
We're laughing, and I think it's probably the only way to deal with this. It's how old's she?
Oh, it was just in the weeks afterwards.
Okay. So those kids, okay. This is how complex it gets, isn't it? It's because it's such an unnatural situation to find yourself in.
Yeah.
And you've got kids with their little children minds trying to comprehend what's going on, and she thinks she's done well. And
That's it.
You can imagine the girls going back and telling their parents.
I know. So it forced this conversation. So I just told them that you can't let people do these things to you, and very graphically, and I was just thinking, oh dear. Anyway, so I did have to have a conversation.
Yeah.
Fortunately, one of the girls' mums was a good friend of mine, and she'd sort of helped. She'd stepped into that role for me. Straight after she got really practical, she was great and said, "I will look after Rose on these days until she goes to school. And you will do this." And she was great in that way. So she already knew, but this other poor mum, she had no idea. But Rose, went into that. Oh well, I can protect people. Yeah. So she had that it was a very childlike innocence still. So Rose went into that protection mode, and I think that's just the way she is, and that's the way she'll always be. Yeah. Pippa withdrew. Yeah.
And that's sad, isn't it, when a kid's internalising things? I can see. I'll give you a moment.
Yeah, she withdrew. And she's got these very vibrant blue eyes.
Yeah.
And they were dull.
Yeah.
Sorry.
You don't have to be sorry. I'll just put a bit of light on it that I've seen them interviewed recent as older children talking about the advocacy that they're doing. Yeah. You're going to be proud of them.
Oh, absolutely.
Beautiful, articulate girls.
Yeah. And look, I think, that was part of the difficulty for all of them. And as I said, Mags was great. She understood why things happened the way they did. She hated that our whole life changed because of what happened. But she's always been really supportive of the girls and always protective too. Very honest. But for Pip, I think not being able to tell her friends or not be able to talk about why it was she felt sad.
Yeah. So
she looked like the sook. She looked like the sook, and the kids didn't know why. And it was just it was rough.
It's a living hell, isn't it? It's a living hell, and so many things are counterintuitive to kids. They've come out and told you, but you can't tell your friends. Like, they don't know the intricacies of a legal system and why you can't discuss it with other people. It's just so difficult for them.
And we did actually approach a couple of parents, and this is no disrespect to them at all, just to say, would it be possible for Pip to share a little bit of what's happened, not in detail, just so that there was a bit more understanding? And they said, oh, we would prefer our kids not to know that sort of thing happens. Yeah. And I was thinking, me too.
Live in la la world.
Yeah, and how fortunate that they didn't have to deal with it. Yeah. Because sometimes I think it is just a bit of luck. Like, we never expected this to be our story.
Sitting down and talking now, and this is the importance of getting this out. People got to understand this is the nature of the crime, the insidious way that people, they prey, they manipulate situations to get to vulnerable children. Yep. Another thing that you were going through, and your husband, was second guessing yourself, like the red flags that you line them all up, and with the benefit of hindsight, how did you miss this? How did you miss that? Tell us about some of the red flags that, in isolation, I wouldn't think anything of it either. But these are the type of things. If we achieve something here, have people look out for these type of things, because they seem innocent on the surface, but just little things that when you look back and think, okay, what was happening there?
Yeah. So I think that one of the first things was repeat UTIs. Yeah. So urinary tract infections. Yeah. I remember the paediatrician saying to me, "Is there any chance that anything has happened to the girls?" And I'm like, "What do you mean?" And anyway, he sort of said it again, and I was just like, no, like I couldn't think of anybody. Yeah. I couldn't think of anybody in our life, because to me, Jen was looking after our girls. Yeah. He wasn't a consideration in my mind. So there was that, very quiet and shy, was one of the girls, not wanting to stay over there anymore. Yeah. Incontinence. Yeah. We had incontinence. There was some inappropriate touching that happened one time that I recalled, and it was like, oh no, you can't do that. And because I was that parent that was saying, you're not allowed to let people touch you. So your vagina is private. Yeah. I was doing that, and I was using the word. Yeah. But again, that's the way these people operate. Yeah. So there were lots of little flags. Rose, and this is sort of a well-known story now, she wanted me to make her a cape. Yep. So I made her this superhero cape. She was Super Rose. Yeah. And she wanted her superpower to be invisible. Yep. And I was like, all right, well, we'll see how we go, So we made this cape, and it was, fabulous cape. And she brought it home from their house one day, and she put it on the ground and stomped on it. I was like, what are you doing? And she said, it doesn't work. Yeah. And I said, what do you mean it doesn't work? And then she said, he still found me. I was like, who still found you? And she said, oh, Leon. Yeah. And I, at the time I was like, oh, they must have been playing hide and seek. Did not even give it a thought. Yeah. And that's the other thing. I've had to very deliberately, even though I can look at these things and put them all together, I've very deliberately decided that I can't live in that. No. Because it would drive me crazy. Yeah. Brent went to pick Rose up one day, and he actually, in hindsight, went, I think I interrupted something. Either it was just about to happen or it had just happened, because he turned up at a time that he didn't usually. So his advice to people is always, don't be too regular. Yeah. Don't be too regular, don't be too obvious.
We want to make it hard for these people, but they're very skilled manipulators.
And they manipulate our whole family.
And that's what they that's how they get access to the children, the victims. Describe him. Describe the type of person that Leon is.
I didn't particularly like him. Yep. I really liked Jen. Yeah. Like the minute I met her, I really liked her. Yeah. He was very confident, a bit smug, a bit of a know-it-all, I think you would say. Like he was a know-it-all. Mm. I know that people around the town liked Jen, tolerated him. Yeah. He was nice enough. He was great with the kids. Mm. The kids loved him. Yeah. They did. Yeah. They did because, he'd play puzzles with them, and he'd, do this and that. He was just a bit, he was just kind of there. And as I said, he was, Rose adored him. Mm. She did. It's such a difficult situation because there's more decent people out there than there are creeps like him. So everyone can't be tarnished. But I can talk from a man's point of view. There's relatives that, okay, you'll be in situations where you're looking after a kid on your own. But I wouldn't feel comfortable looking after a child on my own
I'm not related to,
Yeah.
and I know there's a lot of bad things that happen within families, but I think I have a concern when I see someone, and it might be at that family or just a party, a gathering, and someone's always down in the backyard playing
Yeah.
just with the kids.
Yeah.
I'm not thinking that's, adults tend to want to gravitate towards adults. Yeah, you can be friendly to kids, you can like
Yeah.
kids, but anyone's constantly wrestling with kids or, oh, look, I can look after them, make an excuse. I think we've got to look out for those people.
Yeah. And it's interesting because it was the day before they came around to our house and Pippa, we sort of had a big room and then we had like a playroom off that with massive doors. It was quite open. But we had a couch around the corner. And Brent said, I went around the corner of the couch and now that I look at I know something was not okay.
Yeah. Again, the benefit of hindsight.
So he was getting, and that was the thing, I think what was happening, he was getting more, he was taking more risks, I think, and doing things that were physically hurting, and that's why it had to stop as far as Rose was concerned.
Yeah, I think, and not just talking your case, but any case, if there's doubts or whatever, hindsight's a wonderful thing looking back, but quite often, little things like that. If someone's spending a lot of time with kids that are not their own, I'm a little bit wary of it and thinking, what's going on here?
Yeah, that's it.
And we've got to, because it happens so much. It sickens me, the figures of how many kids are sexually abused.
Well, we didn't realise how much time he had with them on his own. Like, again, for us, our kids were going and being looked after by Jen.
Yeah. It
wasn't until we found out what was happening, she would sometimes be upstairs and he'd be downstairs, and and that sort of seems to be where things were happening. And one of the saddest things that Pip said to me was that they were there one day and she Maggie was upstairs with Jen and she and Rose were downstairs with him, and Maggie said, oh, come up, lunch is ready, and he said, Pip, you go up, Rose and I'll stay here for a bit. And Pip said, no, Rose can go up, because she knew what he was going to do. And like, what a girl.
Protecting a little sister.
Yeah, so...
Something special, isn't she?
Yeah. So, that happened, and But again, as you say, hindsight, you go, oh, but I can't dwell on that. Can't live in that.
No.
It would drive me mad.
There's something about child sexual abuse that we have really got to work this out, because there's no excuse for it. There's no mitigation. And it destroys lives.
Yeah.
It destroys lives. And, another aspect, and before we just finish up here in part one, that part of the problem that you had, and we touched on it, but just how it played out, you were concerned that whilst this matter was being investigated, they had access to other children.
Yeah.
And you were waiting for risk assessments to be done, but there was a period of time over months where a risk assessment wasn't done, and they Leon still had potentially access to children. That must have played on your...
Well, I was really naive. I was. I just thought that the police would go and, interview these other people to make sure, or let them know that there was a risk.
Yeah.
And then, Glenn explained to me that they can't do that because obviously then that can interfere with the case down the track, blah, blah, blah. But that docs could because, and, I'm saying, well, I'm a mandatory reporter and I'm letting you know that there is a risk. There's a real risk to these kids. Yeah.
And that must have troubled you. Like, at what point do you go, well, stuff the rules, stuff what we're meant to do. I've got to tell such and such mother that be wary.
Well, I actually had a friend be a little bit harsh.
Yeah.
Which I'm pleased that she did.
You need some harsh friends.
Yeah, it was good, but because I kept getting told it was, it's going to be done, it's going to be done, but it was kind of getting passed around. It was like this, political football being passed around, and no one wanted to take responsibility for what needed to happen. And so my friend said to me, she said, Michelle, if you had this knowledge about my children and you didn't tell me, I'd be really pissed.
100% with
And I'm
her.
thinking, how did that land on me? This was like a few months later, and I'm thinking, how does this land on me?
Your life has been literally turned upside down. Everything you thought was right in life is been flipped.
I was really concerned that people wouldn't believe us.
Yeah.
I was.
Well, it's again the nature of the crime, because it is so confronting.
Yeah.
People choose not to even engage in it. No, it couldn't be happening. Who knows? Let the courts, so they don't have an opinion on it. But, it's heavy stuff, isn't it?
Yeah.
The way it impacts. We're going to have a break, and we're talking. If people think this is the end of the story, this is just the beginning of the story of what you guys had to go through for the next couple of years. The system lets us down, doesn't it? It drags on like the slow justice.
Yeah, but if you jump up and down hard enough, you can make some changes, right?
Well, that's why I like getting people on the podcast that do jump up and down, because they're the ones that make the changes. And, you got to scream from the rooftop sometimes. And, okay, enough said. I think we'll give you a hint of what we're going to talk about in the second part. But just before we finish up, I know how hard this is talking about it. And in the conversation I've had with you prior to us sitting down here, it's important people talk about it, because I think this crime is allowed to flourish because people don't talk about it. Yep. And I want people listening to your story, because that's what I got from the lengthy document that you created, how much it impacts on lives. Yeah.
Look, I it's one of my frustrations, and particularly being an educator, I don't think schools talk about it enough. No. We have National Child Protection Week, and there's schools that don't even acknowledge it. Yeah. There's a lot of work that needs to be done, and we need to put the shame where it belongs.
Good way to finish part one.
Yeah.
Put the shame where it belongs.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll have a break and we'll be back shortly.